Ever since we started grade school, we've all been told that we need a big, strong government to look after us, and that sure, it may need fixing here and there, but generally today's government size is about right. We disagree. We think that government is a parasite, living off what you and I earn and using our money to do unpleasant things to us. From being a nation of self-reliant go-getters, America is fast becoming a country of government junkies. We think an alternative exists, one that puts you back in charge of your own life and destiny. We call it the freedom alternative.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Freedom Alternative, the one program on television that says government should obey the law. I'm Jim Davies, and today Peter Verderosa and I are going to bring you two examples of how homelessness, far from being curable by government action with taxpayers' dollars, is actually caused by government action with taxpayer dollars. Every so often, the bigger TV channels bombard us, do they not, with tear-jerking pictures of street people right outside those plush offices in New York City where the major networks prepare the news they feed to us each day. They do it especially around Christmas time, trying to make us all feel guilty, as if we had put them out there, and to soften us up to pay more taxes to solve the problem. Well, we say they and the politicians are no better at solving the problem of homelessness than they are at counting the size of it, and that there are several distinct ways in which government actually causes most of it. In today's program, you'll see two of those ways. We hope to bring you some of the others in future editions. The first of those two is a particularly shocking and recent case. Our friend, Andrew Melchinsky, who has several times appeared on our program, was evicted last Thursday with his wife from his home in Enfield by federal marshals. Let's go right over there and see what happened. Andrew Melchinsky.
Yes, sir.
Would you tell our viewers what happened to you last Thursday?
Yes, I got up and I was going around the house and heard some noises on the back yard yelling, "Melchinsky, this is the marshals, open the door." And then shortly thereafter I heard a smashing noise.
A smashing noise?
Yeah, they had broken in the back door, back breezeway door.
The house we're talking about is this one behind us?
Yes.
This is your home?
Yes.
How long has it been your home?
For almost 30 years.
And the marshals came and broke in on Thursday morning.
Mm-hmm.
Today is the 19th of January 1992, so this will be the 16th.
Yes.
Is that right? A day that will live in infamy?
Oh, yeah.
Now, take us through this, what may have been a traumatic experience for you. What happened then? They broke the back door, then what?
Yeah, I was on the phone to some IRS agent that called us supposedly to set up an appointment with me.
Oh, really?
And while I was talking to him, I heard the shouting and then the smashing noise, and then they were banging on the breezeway door, and they battered it down somehow, and came charging into the kitchen, pointing their guns in true TV fashion.
They had guns?
Oh, yes. Yeah, and they were pointing at me. They told me to raise my hands, and I didn't. I probably would have died then if they were as nasty as they can be. But they didn't. They allowed me to leave my hands down. And then they went poking in all the rooms with the guns the way they do in the TV.
Oh, my
down
goodness.
the cellar stairs and into the bedroom doors. And said they were taking over. And I says, the court order was till the 27th. He says, you read it wrong. And I reread it several times, and it still said that the 16th date was continued to the 27th.
Now, on an earlier program, an earlier edition of the Freedom Alternative, we met you here.
Yes.
This was at the end of November. We were then expecting them to make a raid on, I think, the 18th December.
The 16th.
16th.
Mm-hmm.
And they then put it off.
Yes.
And we knew about that until, you say, the 27th of January.
Yes, which hasn't come yet.
So they backed off. They changed their mind in some way.
Yeah, they sure did.
They took you by surprise.
Oh, and how?
And how, right.
Yes.
Did this, you say you were talking to the IRS agent on the telephone.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he knew that this was going on?
Oh, yes. I think he was keeping me occupied, probably, so I couldn't start the phone tree going.
So they were pretty eager to stop any kind of reaction from you, maybe a firefight, possibly?
Yeah.
And to get your friends around to film this event?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's
They
fascinating.
wouldn't let me call my friends because they were they believed in the Second Amendment. That's the reason they gave for not letting us call.
Explain that, would you?
Well, the Second Amendment is the one that guarantees our right to keep and bear arms.
And you say they believed in that?
They said that my friends believed in that, and therefore I couldn't call them.
Oh my goodness, they said this?
Yes.
That's amazing.
Oh yeah.
So they know what's what.
Hmm?
So they knew what they were doing. They knew what's what.
Yeah.
And so they rounded you and your wife up. Did they take us through the rest of that
she was
episode?
crying out in the kitchen near the sink. I don't know whether she got the chair from, but she was, you know, she was very upset, and I don't
I
blame
can
her.
imagine.
And they said that we could had 10 minutes to get dressed and get out of the house.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
And you've been there 30 years.
Yeah.
Go on.
And it took us about 20 minutes. And they were anything we wanted to get. We had to point at it, and they wouldn't let us pick it up or touch anything.
Oh my goodness!
They handed us whatever we asked for.
Yeah.
I had to change my clothes in front of them, and they let my wife in the bathroom with the door half open.
Yep.
They wouldn't let her close the door all the way.
How about that?
And then she walked out, but they carried me out. And
You wouldn't walk.
No, because
Good for you.
it's my home, and
That's right.
it's the least I could do
That's right.
is not walk out voluntarily.
And then what happened to the belongings in the house in the rest of the day?
They moved up moving vans and moved them into the moving vans. Initially, they planned to set them on the curb and then move it into the van from the curb, but I guess they thought it was more efficient to tow them directly from the house. And I was told that I had 15 days to pay charges if I wanted to get the stuff back.
Oh my goodness!
They gave me an option of moving it myself, but I was not in a position to contact a mover or anything like that. So they took the stuff out of the house, emptied it, boarded it up.
We can see the boards right there.
Yeah.
That's outrageous.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you now? Where are you living?
I'm staying with the thralls.
Your friends who've given you accommodation.
Yes.
If it were not for them, as far as the government is concerned, you'd be homeless.
Well, I am eventually homeless.
I mean, you'd be totally without anywhere to live.
Right.
In fact, in this weather, that was the coldest day of the year at the time, right?
Yeah.
And it's pretty chilly today.
It sure is.
You'd be dead. You'd have not survived the night.
If I had any place to go for shelter, I would not have survived, no.
Now, Andrew, apart from the marshals who carried this out with their guns, who would you say is responsible for this raid? Who carries responsibility? Who did it?
Well, I think the major person who's responsible is Judge Peter Dorsey, so-called Judge Peter Dorsey of the federal court, who arbitrarily declared that I was in default and that my property was forfeit.
I must ask you, in default of what? A little quick background here.
Well, they ordered me into federal court in order to show cause why I should not be evicted. And I sent them back an affidavit stating that I did not recognize their jurisdiction and they had to go to a probable cause jury to get permission to bring an action against me.
They reckoned you owed them money?
Yes, and
you denied that?
Of course.
And therefore, according to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, they're obliged, are they not, to give you a jury trial?
Oh, absolutely.
And you refused to cooperate until they did, is that right?
That's right.
What it comes down to?
When they ordered me into court, I came back and said I demanded a neutral judge and a probable cause jury hearing so that I could tell them why the government couldn't come after me.
Okay.
Which is the proper way to go under the Constitution.
Right.
Unfortunately, they either don't know or are ignoring the Constitution.
Okay.
I don't know which.
Okay.
But they claimed that I owed a debt, which I didn't. Well, they claimed that a company owed a debt, which it didn't. They've never established a debt for the company. And even if they had, you still, under corporate law, you still can't charge the officials of a company with the debt. That's the reason for corporations.
Whether the debt was owed or not owed, the matter should have been settled by a jury trial.
Yes.
And they denied you that.
Oh, yeah.
Judge Dorsey is his name?
Oh,
He
yes.
denied you that. Who else is in the chain of command here? Who else is responsible for this?
Well, Nancy Griffin is the one that's in charge of the illegal effort down in New Haven.
Where does she work?
In New Haven.
In what capacity, I mean?
U.S. Attorney, Assistant U.S. Attorney.
Okay. And when you knew this was likely to happen during December, you took some action, you and your friends, did you not, to ask for various government officials to intervene? Did any of them intervene?
No.
Whom did you ask, for instance?
Oh, Nancy Johnson, among others, both the senators, the state reps.
Both the senators from Connecticut?
Yes.
Name them. Dodd?
Joseph Lieberman and
Christopher Dodd, is he the other one?
Yes.
And these people failed to respond and do anything?
That's right.
But they're the public officials charged to protect the rights of the individual.
Oh, yes.
And they did nothing?
They did nothing.
Who else did you appeal to and who did nothing?
Well, to the news, to the town, you name it, to the governor. It's just about...
You appealed to Governor Weicker?
Anybody who had some sort of responsibility for intervening and saying, hey, this guy's entitled to a jury trial, make sure he gets it.
That's right.
Everybody who was in a position to do that had been contacted.
Did Governor Weicker take any action to help you?
Oh, he said he can't tell the government what to do, even though the states are above the federal government under the Constitution.
Exactly right. And what about, did you go to anybody in Washington? Did you appeal to anybody in Washington, D.C.?
Oh, yes. Initially, I appealed to the president, or I sent a letter to the president.
You wrote to President George Bush?
Oh, yeah, back at the beginning.
And what did he do to help?
Nothing, absolutely nothing.
Very interesting.
Yes.
So this is a pretty bad situation.
Yes.
What happens next? What are you going to do next, and what do you think our viewers could do to help if they wish?
I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm basically still in a state of shock.
I can imagine.
I didn't prepare because I didn't want to get used to the idea.
Right.
And so I'm in a position now of groping around, and after conversations with others and deep thought of my own, I realized there's only one good answer to this, and that is to meet force with force. At this time in history, that's not too feasible.
They got more guns than we have, you mean?
They've got more guns than we have, yes. Now, theoretically, everybody in town should have been here protecting my house from them, because under the Constitution, the only way we can keep government under control is if we, the people, act against abusive government.
Right.
And obviously, this is abusive government. They have arbitrarily ignored the Constitution and trampled on all of my rights.
Your neighbors didn't help?
No.
Not that there may have been much they could do, but did they express sympathy?
There are some who offered if they could, but
that's nice.
It's pretty hard to say to somebody, hey, go get a gun and help
No,
me
I understand
off
that.
these savages.
I understand that. Is there anything that you feel our viewers might do if they feel as angry as I do, for one, and would like to help?
Well, whatever comes to mind, I'd like to suggest that they write to their congressman, but obviously that doesn't do much good.
You've tried and it's failed.
Should they do that, they should, note the response and advertise that response. It will not be very satisfactory.
Right, right. And are we going to give this as wide an exposure, this deed that was done last Thursday? We're going to give it as wide an exposure as we can. That's what we can do on the Freedom Alternative.
Good.
These villains have done something that they would like, I think, to hide from public view.
Oh, yes.
We're going to deny them that privilege.
And please notice that the national media is not here to show a direct attack on our basic rights.
Why do you think are the national media not here?
I think it's because they're part of the system that has been growing up over the years in such a way that the individual who recognizes his basic constitutional rights and stands up for them does not have a chance. And the media promotes that, partly by telling outright lies and many half-truths in such a way to picture me as some sort of a nut when all I'm doing is standing up for my basic rights.
If this does nothing else, it'll show the people watching this program what kind of organization the government truly is. Apart from writing to their congressman, is there anything else that any of our viewers might do to help you, if they wish?
If somebody's got a building they can donate so I can set up Constitutional Revival again, I'd sure appreciate
Constitutional Revival being?
Yeah. It's an organization dedicated to causing minimal government so that we the people can be free.
Okay. And you need a place to live and operate this from?
Yes.
Folks, if you happen to have a home, a house, that you'd be willing to lend, donate, otherwise provide for Andrew, there's your opportunity to help. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it.
Jim, what kind of press coverage was given this event?
Well, Peter, generally negative. We already showed the Hartford Courant paragraph ridiculing Andrew's incredible courage, and here's what the Journal Inquirer did to him. It did ask the right question, though it didn't explain on what it was Andrew might be freeloading. But right there in the second paragraph, it found one of Andrew's neighbors and had him give the wrong answer. You'll remember Andrew told us most of his neighbors had been sympathetic. Here's one he didn't recognize, so he could hardly have done him any harm. Yet just look at the quote. Most people feel he's getting what he's got coming to him said neighbor Harry Goodhue. Some neighbor. So, Mr. Goodhue of Fairfield Road, Enfield, if you're watching, please be advised that we sincerely hope that when your day comes, you too will get everything that you have coming to you.
Jim, why wouldn't the feds give Andy the jury trial that he demanded?
Well, Peter, the Bill of Rights names only two kinds of lawsuit, criminal and civil, and in both, the jury trial is guaranteed. Now, if they had obeyed the law by doing that, the caseload of tax claims above $20 would stretch from here to the year 4000. And, of course, the whole income tax system would collapse in ruins. All taxpayers everywhere, therefore, have reason to be profoundly grateful to Andrew Melichinsky for his valiant attempt to get that burden off your backs.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm really dismayed at what happened there.
Yeah.
And, Andy's request for a place to start
To live.
to live
And to work.
is the main thing, to live and to work. But if anybody out there has a place, I know that the housing market is experiencing a glut these days.
A lot of houses doing nothing.
A lot of
there.
houses that are winterized
Yep.
and in danger of the pipes freezing, especially this time of year. It would be better for the owner or the landlord to perhaps donate it to Andrew and his wife at
Have
this
somebody
time.
live in it.
That would be great, and you can do so by contacting us at the number that's given at the end of the program or at 438-5224. And we'd be glad to relay the information on to Andrew.
Sure.
You know, there are many ways that the government can add to the role of homeless people in this country. We've just seen one of them. There are many ways indeed, and another one that we're going to study with the remaining portion of our program this episode is one that deals with coercive psychiatry. And somebody very qualified to speak on this subject is our guest for the remainder of the program. His name is Steve Mendelsohn, and he's coordinator of the Legislative Coalition on Psychiatry and Human Rights. And he's a member of the Board of Directors of the Connecticut Coalition of Citizens with Disabilities. Welcome, Steve.
Hi.
We've had you here before. We're glad to have you again. And I might start off by saying that last evening on the news, and today, by the way, is the 21st day of January 1992 for this edition, just to give the people relativity. And in what I saw last night in a report, they said that currently in New York City, there are 100,000 homeless people. And I was very interested in the report that 50% of them are mentally ill. What about that?
It's probably very much exaggerated, the percentages being given, and it's partly an ideological justification for trying to boost up the political power of biological and coercive psychiatry. I mean, there are some sources you might contact who will tell you that 80 or 90% of the people on the streets are mentally ill and in need of some form of care and treatment. Obviously, the first thing, even if we believe in this whole nonsensical idea of mental illness, instead of realizing that people are human and have ordinary problems and need love and compassion, is which comes first? Are the people on the streets ostensibly in need of help because they have brain damage problems with their brain, or they have these problems simply because they're human and they're homeless and they don't have a home? And if you or I were out on the streets and didn't have a home, we'd have the same kinds of problems.
In many instances, even though the media is not saying so, they do make innuendo, as though these people had to be released from institutions because of budget cuts, and relate that to budget cuts, especially during the Reagan administration, which I don't recall having paid less taxes as his administration progressed. Is this a valid argument?
Not at all. In fact, reinstitutionalization occurred during the Reagan years. Actually, if we look at the history of psychiatry, the very history of psychiatry begins in 17th century France with the creation of large state mental hospitals like Bicêtre and Salpêtrière for the express purpose of trying to sweep people off the street and make society more tidy. What is obviously in this century we have the brain disabling treatments like lobotomy, insulin shock, electroshock, and the tranquilizing straitjackets called neuroleptics. And then around the late 1950s, early 1960s, we decided it was just too expensive to keep people in the institutions. So instead of forcing more and more people into the institutions, we just forced more and more people out of the institutions.
What about the idea of how these people got there in the first place?
Most of them were, the majority of people who get locked up in institutions are not homeless to begin with. They're political dissidents, social dissidents.
Misfits in society.
Yeah, people who don't always act responsibly.
But in other words, who deems them misfits? See, that's...
The psychiatrists, the experts.
And you claim that they are biased to a great degree? And
I believe they have no right to do that. They have no right to initiate force in a free society. The only just use of force is to punish crime, not to control people who are a little bit different. I mean, there are people who get locked up in mental institutions because of their hairstyle, their diet, because they displease children who rebel against their parents. There's a whole organization in this country called the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, which is propagandizing that homelessness is all the result of mental illness, is because these parents want to control their adult children. The kids act in ways that the parents don't want. And so instead of offering love and accepting that the kids are grown up and parents have to let go, they lock them up and say that the problem's all biological.
You seem to be saying that a substantial percentage of cases of institutionalization are by families committing family members to the institution. Is that true?
I'd say probably a majority of them are family members, and in a sense they're acting like mafia henchmen.
So the person who gets committed, really, you could see how they have no rights, virtually no rights.
Easily. They have essentially they have no rights, although people think they have rights. As I said on an earlier show, we have such a thing called voluntary mental hospitalization, but it's a fraud because you don't have the right to leave.
In the program last night, they tried to get the view of passersby, and obviously it was edited. Some said that what appeared to be apathy on their part toward the homeless was not so much that, but that they felt frustrated in that they could not discern who was legitimately in need to pay the rent, as one lady put it, versus that person who was trying to beg for money to do nothing more than just go and buy a bottle or buy some drugs with the money. But in this issue of government creating homeless people, do you believe that there is a stake in this on the part of politicians to maintain this situation for the vote?
Very much so, and in a lot of different ways. There are certain tenants groups who think that they're better off with rent control when actually by adjusting the housing markets, there's actually an artificially created housing shortage has increased the homeless problem. And it's economics that's probably the reason for the majority of people being homeless. It's not anything really to do with psychiatry to begin with. Obviously there are some, and the people who are homeless because of psychiatry were created that way by the very biopsychiatric policies pushed by extremists like E. Fuller Torrey and the Alliance for the Mentally Ill. They have a political interest because what they want is access to tax money so that they can afford to commit and institutionalize their ostensibly ill relatives.
A portion of, I imagine there is a percentage of people who are more, their deficiency is more psychologically based than actually physiologically based. Could it in fact be a vicious cycle that to a great extent pressures created by the American government are causing people to crack under the stress? Let's say the taxes, the this, the that, all of the pressures created by government, putting people in the squeeze. Do you see that as contributing to people sort of losing it, shall we say?
On occasion it might. Obviously, people have to take personal responsibility, and and on that side too, I mean, we have government excusing people from responsibility, and that's part of this whole system too. is that people are treated like little, the government treats everybody as little children and tries to take care of everybody and infantilizes everybody, and then they don't know how to live as adults. They don't know how to take on adult responsibilities. That's a lot of the people who are homeless and who are so-called mentally ill, according to the definitions of Tory and AMI, are people who simply have not learned to take on responsibilities as adults.
So contrary to what a lot of, let's say, ultra-liberals would believe, that we must take care of these people and that, in fact, it is circumstances, it might just be that government intervention has created more of them, and that, in fact, a laissez-faire situation or a totally hands-off situation would allow every one of them to find a niche in a free society, and it would be livable.
Yes, but I also think we have to understand our own moral, not legal, but moral responsibility to be able to offer help voluntarily and in a manner which assists people to take care of themselves. The Jewish philosopher Maimonides had a ladder of tzedakah, and the highest level of tzedakah was to help another person become self-supporting. I think we've forgotten that in recent times, and we seem to want to. There are a lot of people who want to make people more dependent so that they can claim how compassionate they are, when in fact that's not really being compassionate.
Okay. So then, Steve, what you're saying is that first, depending on the circumstances, however it comes about, first the government traps or virtually incarcerates the subject, okay? Then it mistreats the person.
Brutally sometimes. Electroshock, drugs, lobotomy,
okay, but
a lot
to the
of people in
point,
insulin coma.
But to the point where they can't cope with the world. And then
Totally desocialized.
Finally, it releases them back into society.
Dumping people on the streets when they've been so totally destroyed they don't know they don't know how to live on their own.
You, when we spoke before the program,
It's called the revolving door. So, and basically the door's been turning faster and faster lately, so that people have shorter stays inside and shorter stays outside. So people go in and out and in and out.
Hence, more cost to the entire society.
You're right.
In tax dollars. Wow. It's hard to believe. It's a strange situation.
It's just as wrong to force people out of institutions once they're desocialized as to force them in.
Amazing.
And now we're back on the pushing people back in who are out. Because we're saying that pushing them out was a failure, not realizing that the real problem is force.
Okay. Steve, it's been a pleasure having you here. I hope to see you again soon, okay?
Okay.
And all of you, we'd like you to tune in again next week, same time. And once again, we'll give you a new, refreshing choice. It's called the Freedom Alternative. So long, everybody.